Intergenerational leadership is at the heart of the future vision of the YWCA of Fiji. Our 60th anniversary is an opportunity to celebrate our founding leaders and the waves of contribution our members have made to progress women's rights and the goals of equality, sustainable development and peace in Fiji and across our region. We're working to build a collective understanding and commitment as a member of the World YWCA movement to co-create programs that center young women and girls in future programs affirming our commitment to human rights-based, feminist, faith, and intersectional leadership that is inclusive, grounded in local communities, and grassroots-driven. This film is an initiative of the YWCA National Executive Committee and is dedicated to the YWCA members past and present that have continuously promoted intergenerational leadership for our women.
I began to realize about the existence of this women's organization in primary school because my mom made me join the city library. So every Saturday when I have to go and change my library books, you'll go past the old town hall building, and it's always a hive of activity every Saturday, and I always see YWCA written and on most the boards. Later on, I began to read about the YWCA and the work that they do in the newspaper. There was always mention of either hockey or netball activities, and even what the YWCA was saying. So I saw this position being advertised in the YWCA, and I applied, and the board at that time, headed by Andipina Tamakodoro, called me in for an interview, and they said they would like to give me a chance to be the General Secretary.
Back in 1990, to be precise, that would be December, I know we'd been to the YWCA, so I had some inclination about what the Y building was about in terms of having the capacity to host social events. So for me, the Y was really that, because I remember we'd have volleyball after functions, and we did have it in the Y Hall at that time. And there was also some other social events and fundraising that we'd attend at the Y Hall. And that was really my first introduction to the Y. But it wasn't until very early in December I was called into the Y to actually attend a very short discussion with the then General Secretary, I think, or acting, Mrs. Anna Kama, who happened to be my supervisor at the Fiji Savings and Credit Union League. I grew up in the first capital of Fiji, which is Levuka, on the island of Wawalau. And my mom served as the Women's Interest Officer for YWCA under the Ministry for Women. And so she was very much engaged with, women's activities, everything to do with women on the island of Wawalau and in YWCA. And so as a young girl growing up in Levuka, my mom used to take me to the Levuka Community Center where a lot of YWCA activities used to take place. And so that was my introduction into the YWCA at a very early age.
I got involved in 1990s. That's where when I came back from Papua New Guinea as a single mother. One of my friends told me to go to the YWCA because she said that's a safe space for mothers, for single mothers to go and share what they have gone through. So that's when I joined the YWCA.
I have been actively involved with the YWCA. I think almost since I left school. That would be since about 1962, which is 61 years.
I joined the YWCA in 1986 as a very young woman with an interest in joining the women's rights and feminist movement in Fiji. And it was really the knowledge of my mother who guided me to the Lotoko YWCA hut in Namoli village. And that's where I learned about the YWCA. I also learned about the YWCA as a volunteer then at the Suva YWCA and reading through a lot of her story, the documentation, the cuttings, the work of people like Anne Walker and the International Women's Tribune Center that just helped me understand the pieces of work. I joined the YWCA also because at that time in 1986, Tupo Vere had just been appointed as General Secretary. So for me, connecting with a young woman who was the General Secretary of an organization and who was fairly cool and easy to get on with was really important. So that's one of the reasons why I joined the YWCA. The other reason that I joined the YWCA was also about the C of the YWCA. I grew up as a great-granddaughter of indentured laborers, of women who came to Fiji because of the indenture system, with very strong family ties, both my parents as committed Christians, and having been part of the early days of the YWCA in Fiji, to me, it helped me understand how I can connect my faith and my feminism, my interest in the women's rights movement, with my faith as a young Christian woman.
So we always talk about how we need to be inclusive, and inclusive across different, irrespective of age, irrespective of sex and ethnicity in our context, and all that, and also the need to also address the needs of those who are marginalized in our community, and the kind of issues that we speak for those that are neglected, those who are wrongly, those who've been forgotten or not taken into account in policies. And so that over the years, as you see, the Public Affairs Committee had played a very critical role within the Y of always bringing the membership together on to speak on those issues. And this was sort of like the voice, public voice of the Y was worked out in the Public Affairs Committee. And during the colonial period, as far back as 1965, when the Y decided to work on setting up a Public Affairs Committee, it recognized how critical that role is, and it's always over the years it's spoken on a lot of issues, even during the move towards independence, the electoral voting system and all, the nuclearization of the Pacific, and that thread of conversation has gone right up to even global women's meetings. Now I was talking about Ms. Vakatale at the helm of the Fiji government delegation. Even though Fiji government had a policy on nuclear issues, Section E of the Beijing Platform for Action, some of those language was really moved by Fiji government, because it was the only Pacific Island government at that time that had a policy on nuclear issues. And you know, we went just before Beijing, we had the last testing of the French government. And Ms. Vakatalia herself, who was Deputy Prime Minister at that time, was amongst those women who marched in Suva in protest against that last testing. And, you know, and her government at that time had to ask her to resign as a deputy prime minister. She stayed as minister for education, but she was asked to vacate the deputy PM because she publicly made a stand against the French government.
I think at that time, while we had quite a number of outspoken young women, there was always the tendency to be a bit more not polite, but you are looking over your shoulder and just making sure that whatever you're saying is within the ambient, you know, of being tactful and diplomatic. So I'm really grateful to all the women that were there at that time. And moving on to the 2000s, I think after 1990, there's still that bit because we just finished the 87 coup, but you know, we're still coming out and then settling. And so into the 2000s, I was there, I saw the shift. There were more active young women. Now in our time, and I still remember correctly, the very dominant young women of the Y, and I'll speak specifically for Suva because the Sharon, you know, Bhagwan was the name that was always mentioned when young women were out in the forefront. We had Anina Seru, who was also there, very actively involved. They also had issues that they were very passionate about, and they made sure they spoke out about those things. Nela Basawaya, who's a lawyer, Monica Ragwan, those are the few names. We had Veena Achari even, and so we had quite a wonderful balance of young women who came in at that time and really impacted in their own spheres and in their own areas of work.
When I reflect on these years, as a young woman, quite very active in the Y, it was those years of being able to be mentored and nurtured by some of our indigenous women activists, the likes of Amelia Rokutevuna. You know, like, I just remember her as being tough. Not tough in a physical way, but being tough with how her approach to issues that mattered for women, especially for indigenous women, for grassroots women. And then, you know, we had, there was this, you know, this spirit of activism that was very alive in the Y, and I was very exposed to that as a young woman volunteer. You know, we had the young women like Sharon Bhagwan Rolls, we had Tamsin Vuetilovoni.
One of the most important legacies of the YWCA to me has been the way in which the YWCA in the early days really mobilized around some of the most critical issues affecting women both in Fiji but also in the Pacific. And then in 2000, the movement again through the YWCA to convene the Blue Ribbon Peace Vigil was extremely significant and important for us because we were demonstrating that a cathedral, while it might be seen as a space, a Christian space, a space of those with Christian faith, that actually our faith practice is also one of being more ecumenical, of being interfaith, and that we were able to bring together women and people from many different faiths at a time where, once again, our capital city had been rocked by violence, and it brought together, for me, another type of learning within my journey as a feminist, within my journey as a person within the feminist and women's rights movement. And that really kind of defined my work in terms of the peace and security work, the role we play in continuing to build peace, but also the importance important role that we have as women to really look at some of the drivers of conflict and violence, and whether that is conflict and violence that women face in their homes or the conflict and violence that results in the kinds of crises that we've faced. So I feel that the YWCA has been through a lot as an organization, but also it is us as members of the organization that determines the role we play, both in terms of listening to women from communities, listening to young women, to be able to understand how do we apply our purpose as an organization, in the kinds of programs that we co-create, that we develop and implement with the women, with the young women in those communities. And so for me, it's been really important journey of learning.
At the age of 20, I represented the Fiji YWCA to the World YWCA Council in Cairo, in Egypt. And that was my first time to travel abroad, and my first exposure to, the World YWCA Council. And yeah, it was it was huge. There were just so many women and young women and girls from all over the world.
The leadership of the YWCA World Executive thought to bring 25 young women from all over the world and have what they call like a training program within this Global Women's Conference, the third Global Women's Conference. So we were selected, and each day the 25 young women would be sent off to different meetings to cover what is the NGO forum of the meetings. And I had no idea of how important this global of government women's meeting is.
For me, off the top of my head, it would have to be the World YWCA Council in 1995, Seoul, South Korea. And I was fortunate enough to have gotten the nod from the general members at our biennial at that time. For me, that would be the most memorable occasion in terms of representing the Y and at such a big convening, because this is like global. You get to rub shoulders with women from all over the world that have YWCA representation. And for me as a young woman, it was just a really big eye-opener. So that for me, I think, was a very memorable, enlightening experience, and one I think that will stick with me throughout as a really significant time of my of my experiences in the Y as a young woman.
Come 25 years, it would be a good thing if for a chairperson to have knowledge, skills, and also to have a heart to come right down to cross levels,
I really think we have to work more with the men, because a lot of problems originate with them, and somehow they don't seem to get well organized enough to address those problems.
Well, by 2035, I would have I hope to see a woman prime minister, a woman leader that has who has been a YWCA member become a prime minister. Secondly, for me, is really around, I advocate a lot on anti-corruption. So, we look forward to the day in the future when it'll be a corrupt-free Fiji. So I also see the YWCA taking the lead role in because women are in these leadership spaces, and women are advocating for change around being a corrupt free society,
addressing issues of the issues of violence against women. There will be more safer communities, safer homes for our children. And so, yeah, a better Fiji for our children and our generations to come.
I hope and I pray that we have a Fiji in the future that will talk to young women, especially as young mothers, talking to an old grandmother, talking to our young granddaughters and telling them, this is the now that you're going to learn to do things and live with those things for the rest of your life.
We need to create more space and work together and dialogue with the young women and the older women. Older women have to have that kind of understanding on how they can accept young women issues onto them, and the young women have to understand on how can both work together. I think that's a way forward for YWCA now, is to create a dialogue together and to network and to work together on the issue, common understandings on both.
We have our structures, we have our membership base, our area councils, our clubs, but we have a really important role and responsibility as the YWCA to gather by talking to the women, by listening to the women, the voice and evidence of what women aspire for, what women want to see in their lives, and whether it's then being able to influence the government policies or regional intergovernmental processes. That's really critical. So the voice of women, for me, has always been that rich bed of research knowledge. It's qualitative, yes, but it is just so important for us to show that this is what is coming from our members, from our clubs, from the groups that we represent. The more we can do that better, the more that we organize as the YWCA at the local level, the more we can hold government accountable to the kinds of priorities that should be addressed. So I feel our role and responsibility as the YWCA is to continue to educate women to understand the commitments that have been made to women for gender equality, for women's rights, for child rights, for LGBT and disability rights.
I'm hoping that the government can recognize that in terms of getting women out there in leadership roles, making decisions that are key, and just allowing them that freedom to be them in the spaces that they can control. Like I said, not control in terms of, wielding the feminist power that we sometimes have that connotation about, but just knowing that they have a role that they can play to contribute. And I know sometimes it's downplayed just because people think we're women, we don't have enough voices. And I think that's a cultural thing here, that women are expected to be a bit more, how humbling role, the men are to speak first. Women are here to complement men. And I think when we allow that role to be recognized and appreciated for what they are, women bring a lot more to the table, and the opportunities that are there, if we are allowed to participate, to make decisions, without I think more space for that in terms of women in leadership and women coming out and having a voice and a say and a vote and whatever else is needed to see that women are really out there making waves, because we are women who are intelligent enough, who are qualified enough, and who are brave enough to stand up and speak.